Good morning and welcome to our second Bridge to the Future session. This morning's session will examine some real-life business scenarios to do with finances and changing business models. Some of the scenarios may be similar to the ones we discussed last week, but we have a different panel of experts who will be providing their insights. I'd like to introduce our panel of financial and business experts. Joanne Russo is an insolvency trustee at Russo Corp. Harpreet Komal is Director and Team Leader, Commercial Banking, GTA North for CIBC. Stephen Smith is the Senior Manager, Private Client Services for MNP. David Olesen is the Senior Corporate Counsel, David C. Olesen Professional Law Corp. And Lisa Dunbar is the Director of Business and Partner Development at See What She Can Do, and she's a business strategist. So this morning's session will be recorded, as I mentioned, and shared with our membership. So let's get started. Scenario 1, I am a fairly new company, 8 months old, with a 75% wage subsidy and thinking beyond the 12 to 16 weeks covered by the currently offered programs. If there isn't enough demand to justify bringing my staff back full time, how can we leverage a gradual return to work program until demand does come? All the while still getting some business supports from government programs and also allow the employees to get some government assistance over the course of the transition. Are there any programs available to support this type of cooperated transition back? Anything specific for newer companies, i.e. WorkShare is for companies that are at least 2 years old? Who would like to start with that?
I'll step in with a couple of comments. The first thing that I would look at is what does the company do? Are there some opportunities that may be available for the company to expose itself to? Is the goods or services that it provides something that can easily or with a little bit of work be brought online? Expand perhaps their service offerings to something related to or beyond, but beyond what they're currently doing, to expand their potential revenue streams. And depending on what they're doing, there may be some government programs like the Emergency Goods and Services Program that they could get involved in. Like some companies are doing, we were talking earlier about the hand sanitizer or PPEs, where companies are getting retooled and the government will provide some funding for companies to retool and get up to speed, and then Procurement Canada ends up buying the product from you, so you have that revenue stream. And then insofar as the WorkShare goes, that was amended by the federal government to a 1-year requirement. So in this company's case, if they can, I guess, make it to August, so to speak, continuing to do some business, they could then, with the buy-in of their employees, potentially get involved in the WorkShare aspect of it.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to jump in?
I can.
Lisa, yeah.
I think, like, as a business strategist, from marketing and business strategy perspective, 8 months old, fairly young, unprecedented time. I think overriding, I would recommend that people be fair to themselves and recognize that these are unprecedented times. But in this scenario, I would say it's a great time to check in on your strategic plan for the year, assuming that you have one. If you don't, now's a fantastic time to put one together. But in a certain scenario where you already have a strategic plan in place, check in and revisit your launch strategies, or have a review of your resources, and by that I mean time, people, and money. And I would always advocate for scenario-based planning as you tweak. Now's the time to tweak, obviously, because some of the things that you would have anticipated in building that plan to have happened in the first half of the year are going to be greatly impacted by COVID. What does that mean to your business and the strategies that you set out at the beginning of the year? And how does that impact your revenue model, your people management, all those pieces?
Thank you. The person that asked the question is actually on the phone. Did they want to add anything or ask any other follow-up questions? I've just unmuted you. I'm trying to unmute you. Something going on with this as well. Okay, so we'll move on to the next scenario. Scenario 2, I own a landscaping company that has seen virtually complete reduction since the pandemic started. Because our work requires teams when building decks or fences, we are not able to take on any work right now. Most of our customers do not want landscapers coming to their homes. I will not be hiring back my crew this year if this continues. What supports are there for our industry? Do you have any suggestions on how I might salvage some of my yearly income? And I apologize, but I'm going to have to unmute the presenters again. Just a second. Joanne, you're unmuted.
Okay.
David, you're unmuted. Harpreet, Lisa, and Stephen. Who'd like to take that question on?
I can start. In the way, Stephen, I said I can start. I just started talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
In this, in the same vein, I think people are. It's easy to fall into a feeling of that you have no choice, that you're finished. I think people have equity in their businesses, and I think they're underestimating the value of that equity and the current customer base. And I think it's always easier to continue to steward current customers and keep them happy than to acquire new. There are landscaping companies operating, commercial and private. I think the opportunity would be to reach out. Like, communication is critical through this. I can't say that enough. I think communication with your current customer base to avoid, call out the concerns, that you appreciate and respect the concerns that they have. Here's what you're doing as an organization to address them. And we talk at See What She Can Do a lot about pivoting and reimagining your business. Is there something outside of your current service delivery that you could add to address the shift, and communicate that to your current customers? And it may also be a way for you to acquire new ones.
Yeah, and to add along those lines, I mean, I would sort of challenge, this person to possibly think about, is it really the case that they cannot take on, new business? And the reason why I say that is working with some of my clients that are in a similar industry, as well as what I'm seeing just around my neighborhood. Landscaping is up and running. Perhaps there's a way for these decks and fences to be built with the people standing the appropriate distance apart from one another. Maybe that's a possibility. And also from what I'm seeing is people don't necessarily need to come in close contact with their landscaper in order for the landscaper to do their work. So I'm not exactly clear on why this is the case here. But again, similar on the lines of what Lisa was talking about, this is really a time for businesses to, kind of think about how can we retool what we're doing. Maybe even if there's an industry association within the landscaping community, to reach out and see what are other similar businesses in the industry doing, and how can we really connect with our customers during these times.
Yeah, I think if the concern is the amount of time on site for the homeowner, it's a question of rethinking your operations. I'm not a landscaper, but if it's building fences and you typically build them on site, can you build the sections off site and then minimize the amount of time that you're actually in the person's home, or you're not even in the home, in their. It's reimagining, right?
Yeah, one thing I'll add is just so happens my wife's uncle is in the landscaping business, and I've been sort of working with him, and well, not really working with him, but he's just been bouncing some ideas off. And I agree with Lisa. A lot of it was really reaching out to your existing client base and letting them know that you are actually operating. Because a lot of his clients didn't realize that, oh, landscapers are still allowed to operate. And so once he reached out to them, then it was really a process of coordinating with them a situation in an environment that the client was comfortable with, practicing social distancing. And then one of the things he also found was that some of his clients where he also does lawn maintenance and garden maintenance. And they said, well, I'll kind of continue that myself. He said, well, you're going to need certain supplies for that. So why don't you tell me what you want to do in your yard? I'll go and get the supplies and I'll bring them to you. And he added, 10 or 15% to it. So it's not a lot, but it's better than nothing. So like, it's been said, it's really sort of reassessing what you're doing and trying to expand a little bit more and just communicate with your existing clients.
Yeah, it's a great example because people will, like the weekend warriors, if you will, are like weekday warriors now. And they have the time and people are looking to get outside. Like it may be he could, using that, they may
Lisa, you're cutting
buy
out.
a bunch of, again, not a gardener, buy a bunch of plants and have no idea how to space them, if that matters, what soil to use. So he puts together a kit that is a curbside delivery that supplements any of the other work that he's doing that they can't manage on their own. Great new service model, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that the fellow that I've been working with, he's very much sort of his own handyman and good at carpentry skills and other things like that. So he's also let those around him and his past customers know that if there's other things that come up, if you need something repaired, roof work, things like that, I can do that too. So he's bringing in a little bit of extra business where, a leak is a leak and someone still needs to get it fixed. So.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I wanted to add, yesterday our government has also put notice out there. There's going to be specific guidelines specifically for this type of industry as well, on ways to recommendations and tips for employers on how to keep the workplace safe, specifically for landscapers. So I think it's important that they stay tuned and watch for those guidelines.
Thanks. Move on to the next one. Could I ask all the presenters just put your hand up when you're ready to speak so that I can make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak? I am a small retail store who did not have an online store, so there has been little to no income coming in. I worked with a digital company to develop an online presence and e-commerce. This cost me $2,000. I've seen little return on this. I've started my own social media channels and have been promoting my goods online with very little results. While I am now receiving rent relief from my landlord, I am struggling to keep things going and may need to consider bankruptcy. I have been trying to think of other ways to sell and promote, but don't have enough experience in online or alternative types of marketing. Is there anything else I should be doing to keep my business viable when we come out of this? Who'd like to go first with that?
Okay.
I without knowing the type of products that they're offering, I think the timeline to engage new customers and or ambassadors of your brand will always be will be longer than those that are already converted ambassadors of your brand. So I think it's great that they've invested in an online presence and that they're starting. They can make their footprint bigger by leaning on these ambassadors of their current ambassadors in their social media and sharing stories as a starting point. And I would say for a person, like, it can be frustrating. Yes, you've invested $2,000, which for a small business is quite a bit, but just manage expectations in terms of how quickly you can turn it around and find ways to, I'm going to use the words, fuel the fire, by using people who are already advocates of your brand. And then the community will build organically.
Joanne, I think you had your hand up.
I had my hand, yeah. Well, I think with this question too, I think understanding the type of business that you're in is sort of will help us guide you as to the path and recommendations, because it's understanding your brand, seeing what type of market you're in, being able to assist in long-term projections, and seeing what government programs are out there. So I think understanding, maybe if we can get a better view as to what type of business this is, and we'll probably be able to provide more direction.
So it was a clothing business, I can tell you that.
Okay.
David?
Yeah, there may be some opportunity for them to look into two programs that the BCD is promoting. One of them is a co-lending program with financial institutions, and the other one is a working capital program. Unfortunately, they haven't come out with any details on that yet, but they're supposed to be. Both programs will provide financing of up to just over $6 million per applicant. But again, we're waiting to see what the applicant, what the details of the application forms are. The other thing I would strongly suggest is if, sort of worst comes to worst and this individual feels that they're going to need to consider bankruptcy, definitely talk to a bankruptcy and insolvency lawyer before they do anything. There can be a lot of negative consequences to doing that. It's not necessarily just an easy out. And the other thing I would do is suggest looking at, it's been discussed about your brand ambassadors and that, and it kind of goes back to some of the other comments we've made on the other two scenarios where your best brand ambassadors are your existing clientele. So is the retail store, is a clothing store. Hopefully they've been keeping good data management of their customers. Go and mine that list. Let them know. A lot of times a company can go online and then they sit and they wait. And you're not going to generate any business online unless people know you're online. So you've got to go back and you've got to start going to your existing people that like your products, especially your repeat customers. Let them know you're there. Let them know what kind of promotional programs you have. Maybe start a referral program. If you can get someone else to come on with, and buy something on my online store, you'll get so much % off on certain purchases, and try to generate, a critical mass of customers that way.
Lisa?
I think you may also, the person may also consider, are there partnership opportunities in town? Again, don't know what type of products, but if it's fitness apparel, we're going through a season change and we're coming into summer, and some people are heavier now through COVID than they were before. Just kidding. But people want to refresh their wardrobe, or they've rediscovered a physical activity, right? Is there an opportunity to partner with another business in town to promote? Using the same example, perhaps a CrossFit company who's never actually thought about selling T-shirts or apparel, now have a membership that's looking to rejuvenate their wardrobe. Can you partner with them? Like, are there partnerships that have similar audience that you can partner with? I think of, even if it's not sport equipment, like, is it just general apparel? And again, transition from spring to summer, and we're going to be home, and at some point we're going to have to get out of our yoga pants, right?
Yeah.
So, right, and you can try, and again, it will help to expand that footprint and build both your businesses, because chances are you'll be able to find that there's a partner in town who's also trying to invent their business or pivot to shift how they're operating day to day and how they're looking at their service offering. And if you have something that's unique versus your competitors, great, you have this platform now to share it, do promotion, etc.
Thanks. Tina, I think you wanted to add something, did you?
I did, yeah. I just wanted to add to Lisa's comment around partnership. There's a great example in the food space in Newmarket. Hungry Brew Hops is working with their a restaurant across the street to do a collab menu. So rather than paying full price for the retail space and having to do their own promotion and having to pay Yelp or DoorDash or Uber Eats or like the huge fees on their own, they're sharing the costs of those things. So if you can look for partners who have complementary businesses who would be of value, they could be a distribution channel for you, as Lisa mentioned. There's also lots of networks that are popping up during COVID right now around buying local. So there's lots of community boxes that are local. Like you may want to, it sounds weird, but like go with a local farm box. And if your I don't know what your apparel is specifically, but if you can find some sort of joint value system that works, like work through somebody else's distribution channel that's already out there to promote your product, whether that's through virtual networks, whether that's through a physical partner that you may not have even considered in an industry that would use your product, or whether that's social networks. We're happy to, like Lisa and I, Caroline's on the line as well, we're happy to take an hour to brainstorm with that person, because it sounds like a pretty dire need on some specific marketing tactics that you might be able to use.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So scenario 4, I own a local restaurant currently offering curbside pickup and delivery. I have not been able to work out a deal with my landlord to pay 25% of my monthly rent for 3 months. He's telling me he doesn't qualify. I have applied for the CEBA loan and am having problems being approved, as the email that comes back does not provide concrete details of why I have been rejected, even though all my financial information says that I should be eligible. I have laid off all of my employees, but I'm now worried about the reopen and what it will look like, especially if social distancing remains in effect and I have to limit the number of clients that can eat in. What else could I be doing to ensure I still have a business at the end of this? And why do you think I'm being rejected for the CEBA loan? Could there be a question that I'm answering incorrectly? Are there any other financial supports to get me through this period or to support my reopening, as I have to ramp up my marketing when I'm back in business?
Okay, I can take that. So for the CEBA loan, totally suggest talking to the account manager or the relationship manager on the file. We've had instances where people are unable to apply for CEBA loans, and sometimes it's as little as their profile is not up to date with their current email address or phone number. So they call the bank, they get that profile updated, and once it's done, they are then able to apply for the program. It should take less than 5 minutes, and typically the money's in the account within 5 business days. So it's pretty quick once they're able to apply. Again, I would say just reach out to the bank. And with respect to other programs that's launched, I think David alluded to it briefly before. BDC has come out with a working capital loan program for up to $2 million, and it's really standalone basis. I think very loose criteria given COVID, and very generously priced as well. So something that people should consider. If you don't have a contact at BDC, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Sandra can, share my contact information. I'll be happy to put you in touch with somebody at BDC that I know, like a person, instead of going to a mailbox. So happy to do that. And David also alluded to the BCAP program. So banks over the last, I would say 4 to 6 weeks, we've been working with EDC and BDC both, essentially providing companies. Now, given the size of the company, you could qualify, there are 3 buckets, up to $1 million, up to 3.5 or 6.5. I think that's the over $50 million in revenues. So that's really from mid-market companies, but companies in less than $1 million in revenues, or from 1 to 50, you can go up to $3 million, $3.5 million with BDC and EDC. So essentially what EDC does is historically, or their mandate is to help businesses who have who export, right? Who have at least 25 to 30% of their businesses who does some form of exporting. Because of COVID, they have waived that condition. So banks are now able to support local businesses who are domestic with no exporting element, with 80% guarantee from EDC. So that's what EDC has done. And with BDC, it's really co-lend, where BDC comes into play with lending 80%, and CIBC or any other FI would be lending the remaining 20%. For the businesses or business owners, they don't have to worry about going to both institutions. Just go to your main bank, and they should be able to figure out what's the best route or what's the best program for you. Over the last, I'd say, week or two, we've had lots of discussions with our clients, because there are lots of, every business is different. Liquidity needs are different. Business sectors, like some businesses are, more adversely affected due to COVID than others. So it's really determined on a case-by-case basis if standalone BDC is a good option or if it's BCAP using EDC versus BDC. Of course, there's one program's, a bit more flexible. Pricing comes into play. So there's some, more than one or two factors. But the recommendation would be to speak to their commercial banker or business advisor at the branch.
Thank you. And I did hear, I'm just going to add quickly that I heard that your bank account number, that's 5 digits. The application only asks for 4 digits. And it's the first four. A lot of people are eliminating the 0 at the front and putting the last 4 because they don't think the 0 qualifies, but it's actually the first 4 digits. And that has held up a few applications that I know of, and they've got it through after the apply. So David, did you want to go next?
Sure. 2 things I'd add to that. First on, just to call it the cost assessment side. They may assess how they're doing their delivery aspect to it. I know a lot of restaurants that I work with started using, Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes and got tired of paying the 30%. So they actually brought back some employees to do delivery for them. And they're saving a lot of money, and they're making more money because it's not costing them nearly the same amount on the delivery charges. Insofar as the landlord goes, I've worked with companies on both sides of the table, let's say on that one. And, just because the landlord doesn't want to go down the road of the government program doesn't mean that they don't want to do some kind of a deal with the tenant in looking forward and giving some type of a deferral. There's a lot of landlords that don't necessarily want to eat the 25%. They would rather do a long-term deal where they're going to ultimately get 100% and sometimes 100% with interest. And as has been mentioned before, a lot of landlords, or mentioned to me before, certain landlords don't necessarily want to disclose their financials, which is a requirement for getting part of that program. One thing that's usually always clear, or to be made clear to a landlord, is they're better off doing a deal than having an empty space. The month they lose with an empty space, they'll never ever make that money back. So it's always in their best interest to try to make some kind of a deal looking forward. For the tenant, the important thing is to not just look at the short-term 3 months. It's what happens after restrictions are raised. Just because the restrictions are raised doesn't mean your business is going to pop back up to the way it was, especially in the restaurant case. So you're going to need to really look at a deal with your landlord that looks, multiple months out past the lifting of the restrictions and gradually lets your rent come back up while paying the deferred amount.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Joanne, I think you had your hand up.
Yep. Just some comfort with regards to the application process. I know some individuals had to apply at least 10 times in order for it to finally get through. And it is an issue of just a minor glitch, like missing or not putting that 0 in front of the transit number or the bank account number. So don't get discouraged. Just continue, reach out to your bank manager and see if it is just something as simple as a system information not being updated, but it could take as many as 10 attempts to actually get the application through.
Thanks. Lisa, Lisa, did you have something? Sorry.
I was just going to say, again, I keep saying reimagine, but again, it's a way to reimagine how you're operating. It may be, I think tactically about, can you change the layout of your restaurant? Because your patrons are going to be nervous as well. So can you change the layout so they're a little bit more spread out? So at least you have some people coming in, and then continue to leverage the silver lining, the great silver lining that's come out of COVID for small restaurants is that people's appetite for home delivery has skyrocketed, and there's all kinds of advocates for home delivery. So that's been a bit of a silver lining. So ride that and continue with that momentum. Of course, always respecting the resources, time, people, and money that you need to deliver that customer experience. But is there an opportunity to partner with someone? Tina is a CrossFitter, And CrossFit Aurora has partnered with a small restaurant to deliver food solutions to the CrossFit team, and they've built a partnership that they would never probably have ever considered offering.
Good.
So again, just reimagining a little bit.
Yeah. Keith, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to David, your point about the restaurant. One of our scenarios is many restaurants that have seen a drop in their revenue. Even with curbside, many of them are offering 30% discount, 25% discount off, the standard in pricing. So naturally, even if you kept the same volume, you'd be at 25 to 30% lower on your revenue number. And so could you qualify for the wage subsidy? Many times, restaurants are saying yes, they could, but by bringing people back in and using partnerships, I mean, we have a client where they're saying, I've brought more curbside business in than I normally would have in dining room because you're not subjected to the eating time and the turnover. Revenues have gone up in actual fact. And so even with the 30% reduction in pricing, they're still doing better than they were before, quite frankly. And so they stopped qualifying for the wage subsidy. And so they can no longer apply. But that's something just to be aware of, right? Doing well. I think part of the message we're saying is it's actually a blessing to not qualify for the wage subsidy in a sense, right? So don't keep over focused on that threshold of the 30% reduction in revenue just so you get that subsidy. You're actually probably better off not doing it. And the other thing, Joanne, you mentioned, and Harpreet, Harpreet and I had a similar conversation earlier this week on a different client, and it was about relationships with the bank. The comment about just call up your banker. It is surprising how many private business owners historically are, I don't know whether it's petrification or what, they're scared to form that relationship with a group of professional advisors, whether it's a lawyer, banker, insurance folks, accountant, right? And now you're paying the price for it. Yeah. Without having those strong relationships, it's difficult to pick up the phone and call the bank because you don't have that banker to call. So learning experience for everybody in business. Take the time when times are fair, establish that group of professional advisors around you because they become important resources when the need arises.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, scenario number 5. I own a small business and I pay myself through dividends, not salary. All of my employees are contract employees. Because of this, I am not eligible for the $40,000 loan from the government or CERB. Because we are a personal service business, we may be one of the last ones to go back to work. I am worried that I won't have a business to go back to if this goes on for much longer. I've been trying to think about what else I could do to keep things going, but I haven't come up with any solutions. I am worried that if this goes on, even if my landlord agrees to charge me only 25% of the rent, that I will have no choice but to default on my payments, as I have already been using my personal line of credit to keep up with payments, and I don't want to come out of this with a lot of personal debt. Suggestions for them?
Yeah, so one thing that I'll quickly say here is to address the comment about the dividends. So one of the criteria on the CERB, I know the initial announcement was only people who were previously on salary or self-employed, but a later announcement, which ended up making it into the legislation, is if the business owner was drawing dividends of at least $5,000 in 2019, then they would be eligible for the CERB, assuming that all the other criteria is met. So I would encourage this person to go back and check the CERB criteria, because they may find that they qualify. The dividends is not an excluding factor.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I always get a bit concerned when I see or hear individuals say that they're putting in personal injection into their business. And I strongly encourage them to sort of prepare some sort of projections as to if they have to inject any of their personal resources into their business, sort of factor in how many months, they're required to do that and sort of project long-term, and speak to some sort of advisor as to how they can protect themselves at the personal level by taking back some form of security if they're lending money to their business. because that's important, especially when you're planning long term. Again, with the issue of the landlord, I would sit down and communicate with your landlord as far as, you know, what sort of workout arrangement you could have with them to sort of secure your position, especially if you feel that you know, you might be concerned with what your relationship might be with your landlord. So you want to get a better understanding if his cooperation is going to be there long term.
Thank you. Anyone else? Harpreet, did you have your hand up? No? David?
Then I would
Just a
add,
comment.
Sandra, or go ahead.
So just a comment on the landlord aspect of it. As Joanne said, working out a deal with your landlord, at least it's going to buy you some time. If you can get the landlord to agree to apply for the government program, you get a guaranteed 3 months where they can't evict you. So again, that buys you some time. And just understand the situation. If it comes to a point where it doesn't work out and it's a worst case scenario and you can't make the payment on rent and you feel like you're going to get evicted, then definitely do what you need to do in the middle of the night to get your equipment out of the location. The landlord can't lock you out unless you've suffered an arrears of rent. They've given you notice and you have a time to pay. They can't distress your goods or distress the equipment inside the location unless they've not terminated your lease. If they've terminated your lease, they can't distress your goods. If they are going to distress your goods or the equipment in this case, they have to give you notice. They have to give you an opportunity to pay the rent in arrears, and also understand that the landlord can only take or seize the value of the rent that they're owed. And along the lines of what Keith had mentioned a couple moments ago, you can always work with your lawyer or your accountant on some protection mechanisms. Some things that tenants with large amounts of equipment will do. For example, the landlord cannot distress upon any goods that are subject to a security interest or a financing statement, a lien on those goods. So some tenants will go in with a friendly lender, will arrange a third-party line of credit of which they have no intention of ever using, but the line of credit, let's say, may have a limit on it, which is in excess of the value of the equipment. As security for that line of credit, they give a security interest in their equipment and the goods and the assets of the location. You register that financing statement on the Personal Property Security Act registry. And typical practice of a landlord is, if they're going to distress goods, they have their lawyer go and do that survey in-house, do that search for themselves. They'll find a financing statement on the tenant's equipment and assets, and they generally won't bother to distress on the goods or even try to do it.
Thank you. Lisa, did you have something?
I was just going to add, like, I think, of course, of the employees as well, and communication with them would be key through this. It's a lot of uncertainty, and certainly the owner of the business is doing those scenario-based plans. What if this? What if that? I would just encourage ongoing communication with those employees, contract or otherwise, to make sure they feel they're supported.
Thank you. Anyone else for this question? Keith? Have you unmuted?
Sorry, there we go. So is maybe a different perspective, and this speaks to what David and I and you, Sandra, were talking about at the beginning of the call, the emotional side. It's just a little glimmer of hope. So, you know, on a macro level, we put things in perspective. You know, if you look at the stock markets, they have come down a little bit, but they haven't absolutely tanked, right? And so one would say, why is that the case? And it's because stock markets, capital markets generally are forward looking. So it means that investors are seeing that the world is not ending. The economies are not ending. This is not the Great Depression. It's very different. And the difference being that, you know, when you listen to some of the economists out there, they'll talk about there's an end game, there's an end. You know, the vaccine, once the vaccine comes back, normalcy, you know, what the new normalcy will resume. So this is really a temporary state. And you could see that because what's happening is all this government funding, the support, the aid, the quantitative easing, all of that is just to buy time, as economists would say. They're buying time to help businesses through. And the challenge is governments have a very short period of time to understand who needs help the most and at what points of time. So I think being a part of a chamber of commerce like this, you know, is fantastic because it helps collect all this data. And, you know, the chamber, the lobby groups, the industry sector, specialty, you know, networks, they can all help fuel information to government so they know where the help is needed. They're not perfect. They can't help and see everything happening. But if we can be their ears on the ground, be their voice, and help them be informed on what needs help, maybe we can help some of these business owners that are getting neglected by current programs that are available, just to buy a bit of time. You know, as soon as the vaccine comes around, the expectations are that business will resume. And so, you know, hearing this individual's questions, it sounds like they had a viable, sustainable business practice before. And the expectation is that's going to resume. That demand will come right back. And there's no shortfall of that. It's not that demand has disappeared. It's that we're on pause. So if we can find ways to buy time by the various ideas here, whether it's rent, whether it's different channels, I think that time is important. And there is that hope that's going to go back.
Thanks, Keith. Anyone else? Okay, so that's our last scenario. I do have a question that was submitted though prior to the session. Sole proprietors are eligible for the CEBA loan, but don't always have a business checking account. In our situation, we have an individual checking account that all of our business operating expenses are run out of. We meet all of the CEBA requirements except do not have the business checking account. Do you have any advice on how to go about getting approved for this loan? The bank has rejected the request.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the only way to do this is through having an operating account for the business. So my question then actually is, like, when they're filing their taxes for the business, do they not have a CRA employer number, right? So essentially they should have a CRA employer number if it's a business, and would have some sort of an account linked to the CRA account. So the question then would be, is that the individual account that they've used in the past? For CEBA, it has to be a business operating account, but banks can very quickly open the account, so it shouldn't take the banks too long. I think we've automated some of the, the account opening processes and, signing back documents and stuff, like things are being streamlined, where we're accepting electronic signatures and just again to speeden up the process. So our recommendation is to please speak to your business account manager, if you have one, at whichever bank, or speak to your business advisor, branch manager, whoever your contact person is at the bank.
So can I just clarify, because unless this has changed, that when they first introduced CEBA, there was a clause that said the account must have been opened on or prior to March 1st. Because CEBA came out about the middle of March, and they had to have had a business account in place by March 1st. And that was...
I think it goes back to my question on CRA employer number, right? If they have a CRA employer number, which account are they using? Have they been using personal account all this time for the business expenses? And they've used that account for CEBA loan and got rejected?
They did, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to take it away, Sandra, and I'll circle back on the answer.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that concludes the questions that I have. Can everyone just unmute themselves who would like to ask a question? And if you could just put your hand up or give me a signal that you have a question. Does anybody have anything they want to ask? Lisa?
I was just going to, thank you, Sandra, for today. I was just going to add just an overriding message that there are so many amazing, great resources in our community and online to support businesses, small, medium, and large. I would always encourage people to reach out to their network. And there's an overriding through COVID desire for people to support each other through this, roll up their sleeves if they need to. And I think there's so many amazing resources. See What She Can Do has posted marketing resources on our website, but folks like HubSpot have some great tools for digital e-marketing people who are just starting in that place. So all of these examples are, like, there are resources in place, and there's sometimes probably too much information, but it's there. So take advantage of those.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to add? Harpreet?
Yeah, Sandra, something that comes to mind, when some of our clients weren't able to apply or got declined, what they ended up doing was tried calling telephone banking. So this business can try calling telephone banking, and what they will do is they will file the application on your behalf. So that's one avenue that can be explored.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else with other comments or questions?
I
No?
just have a comment. Oh,
Yep,
sorry.
sure.
Just a comment on the issue with the sole proprietorship. Sometimes it could be something as simple as their bank account not having the registration name on file. If they're making their deposits into their personal account, I would want to make sure that they reach out to their account manager to ensure that the business name is actually registered on their account, because that could be one of the issues.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you. David?
Along the lines of what Joanne just said, actually, that also could be problematic if sometime in the future they get audited,
Right.
depending on how
I
they're moving
agree.
money and how they pay themselves and things to that effect, if it's the company's actually working through a personal account.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, we're just about right on schedule, 5 minutes to 12. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'll be posting this up for other people to be able to look at this and get some answers. It was a good discussion. Thank you to all of our panel of experts for joining us, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You too.
everyone.
Thank
Everybody.
you. Thank
Everyone.
you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sandra. Be
Bye.
safe,
Have a
everyone.
great day. Happy Friday.
Happy
Bye.
Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday,
Thanks,
everyone.
Rabbit
Wait,
Dad.
Rabbit.